The main ideas coming from the second opposition is about the distributions, and they assume that the military support uh, distributes. Oh, ngelek ya ulang. Check. Let me turn off the video. What about now? Is it clearer?
Yes.
Is it clear now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me read that. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The main ideas coming from the second opposition about the distributions of the aids, for example, like food, medicine, or doctors through the military support in the conflicting area. But they never, or they miss or dismiss it with the situation in current situation on how most of the military support, they even prioritizing sending the troops for declaring more or escalating the war by sending also the weapon, for example. And especially like some examples I've mentioned previously, like United States of America sending the troops and also military support to Gaza, for example. They don't even provide helps like they're promising at the very first beginning to distribute, for example, donations for Palestine. They only support to Israel. This is what we are worrying about in the military support currently, ladies and gentlemen. We also admit what has been stated by Ersa. Ersa mentioned about how if you don't create peace there by sending the troop, for example, military support there, how can we the helps or the aids like foods, water, or medicine, or doctors, or any else to the victims, ladies and gentlemen. But they forgot about the reality on how, like in Russia, conflict between Russia and Ukraine, United States or even United Nations came to the conflicting area, not focusing on distributing the aids like foods, water, and also medicine. They're focusing on their allies countries like Ukraine. They support against Russia, supporting Ukraine by giving the military support like weapon, also the troops. And this is what happened in the status quo, ladies and gentlemen. And what happened then? The war become escalated and is even bigger because of this kind of the military support, ladies and gentlemen. And we believe that you can also apply the military support, but not prioritizing them. Per se, Ersa mentioned that war is also part of disasters. We also believe so. That's why, as the one who giving the aid, they should not prioritizing to have them on the military support. They should prioritizing like giving the foods and also the medicines and also, for example, like doctors or what's called medications for the victims and victim for both sides, not only for one side of the conflicting areas and but in the status quo, what we don't want happens that when the countries like the United States of America, for example, like some allies in European countries sending troops, sending the weapon to only one side of people, one side of country, which is totally unnatural as the one who are upholding the principle of giving international aid to this gentleman. International aid should be given both sides. And if you support the peaceful situation, so that when you want to distribute the foods and medicine and water, for example, not only distributing for one side of people or one side of group or country, ladies and gentlemen, why then the installations or distributions of those aids are not really good in current status quo? It's not because of the what's called. It's not because of they are difficulty to distribute that because they don't have neutral action for both sides, ladies and gentlemen. For example, they only provide foods, for example, medicine for Palestine, for example, like Indonesia, for example. Indonesians come to the conflict at a conflicting area. The troops come to distribute the foods, medicine, and also the water, for example. And also, like some Middle East country, also sending the what's called the food, the medicine, and also the water. And it's not because of their difficulty to distribute, because there is a military support from one what's called subjective party like United States to block their movement, giving the aid toward the victims, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we don't want to happen. And the support should support the distributions of the food at the very first beginning. But the problem is that they don't do that. In current status quo, they only even provocate people not sending the what's called the aids, the foods, the water, and the medicine toward the victims. And however, like in Gaza, the number of the victims mostly coming from the Palestinians, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we believed on how the even out of the principle of international aid at the very first beginning, because they are not natural, they only allies to one party or one certain countries, which is not fair and which is not in line with the nature of international aid, ladies and gentlemen. And this is what we are happening in to what's called negate the arguments from the second speaker. And I'll come to the crisis analysis. As the speaker of the proposition, we already mentioned to you at the very first beginning comparing about the urgency. We believe that why it is urgent to prioritize disaster relief at the very first beginning, because we believe that the situations currently in a global situation like economic instability, for example, like famine, starving, for example, many natural disasters that, or even war as one of the disaster, and we want to prioritize disaster relief over the military support, over giving the weapon to some certain of countries, to one set of countries, for example, and which is something really bad, and that's in line with the speed of international aid, ladies and gentlemen. By this urgent situation, we believe that it's really important for the governments, like developed countries, for example, like the United Nations as the global institutions or international institution, to give to prioritize more on disaster relief over the military support, because of our team already explained to you on how this is more effective compared to the opposition. Opposition came up here and said that we failed to explain about the effectivities in the debate. Actually, our debate focused on the principal ideas why we should focusing on disaster relief over the military support. If asking about the effectivity, however, actually my first and second speaker already mentioned to you on how this is more effective to calm down the conflict, to overcome the root of this problem is enlightenment. And why do we believe that uh, disaster relief is something more basic in terms of uh, what's called disaster. When we talk about the, for example, natural disaster, when we talk about the disaster because of war, like you have defined as the proper opposition, we believe that the first action that you have to do is that relieve the problem first. The starving, for example, the hunger, for example, the famine issue, for example, distributing the medicine because of the effect of the domestic war, for example, not escalating more war by giving military support to only one side of country, which is totally not in line on doesn't speed in line with the speed of international aid, which is this is what we don't want in this kind of debate, ladies and gentlemen. And because of that, we believe that if you are asking about the effectivity, our team even prove more on the effectivity, because we believe that this is more effective to calm down the situation, to try to find the reconciliation issues and more something on the negotiation. If you're asking about something more, we also do not say that we didn't want only prioritizing disaster relief, but we still allow those countries, if it is a very urgent situation, to also give military support, ladies and gentlemen, but not as the priority and the very first beginning when you give the international aid toward the conflicting countries of the system. This is what actually our proposal at the first beginning. And today, what's the fail of the opposition is all about seeing about the bad impact for the own countries, the origin countries, and also the district country starting the war. And they fail to engage the main ideas of our worthiness toward the global stability in our debate today. And we proud to propose. To strengthen the ideas of the opposition, I call upon the opposition whip.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So, good afternoon to honorable judges and adjudicators, and also to my respected opponents and dear friends. So today, as the third speaker of the opposition side, I will defend our side and show why the motion is wrong. Well, judges, imagine a country where war is raging, people are running from their homes, children are starving, and aid trucks cannot even enter because it is too dangerous in the situation. And let's ask ourselves, what is more important, judges, giving food after disaster or stopping the violence that causes it? And this is why we, the opposition team, stand strong against this motion. This House believes that international aid should prioritize disaster relief over military support. Now, let me remind you of what our teammate has said before. So first, about my first speaker, he already mentioned that many disasters are caused by human conflict. Second one, prioritizing only disaster relief is ineffective, judges. And let's move on to what my second speaker had mentioned before. First, security comes first. And the second one, military aid can prevent bigger disaster damage. Now I will explain you and strengthen them. So first, many disasters come from human conflict, judges, like crisis, hunger, and destroyed cities often come from wars, right? So if the world only gives food and tents but never stops the war, then disaster can continue again and again. It won't stop, judges, and military aid can stop the fighting. So people can live safely after that. Second, disaster relief is not effective if it's the only focus, judges. Relief comes after the damage is done. Well, for example, after an earthquake, people get food for 1 week maybe, but what happens the next month if the earthquake can come back again? Without security and prevention, the problems can come back, judges, and military aid can prevent problems before they become a big disasters. And about the security comes for judges. Why? Because if a country is not safe, then the disaster relief cannot work. Imagine trucks bringing medicine maybe in such a big or huge war zone that happens in the situations. They may be attacked, judges. The doctors can be kidnapped. So without security relief, this cannot reach the people there. And military aid gives us the protection. And the next one, military aid prevents bigger disasters. Why? Because such as wars, terrorism, and invasions can kill more people, judges, than just like floods or earthquakes. So if the military is strong enough, then this disaster can be stopped before they even became bigger or happening. And this saves more lives in the long term, not just a short term like they talk about. And for the global example, judges, they keep talking about maybe like Afghanistan or Gaza. Like, well, we know for many years Gaza and Afghanistan has suffered from like war and terrorism. Israel and like the Taliban groups control their areas and attack their civilians, judges. And because of this, many people lose their homes, schools, and even their jobs. So they do not have anything at all at the moment. And this is also disaster, judges. This is called a massive disaster. And international organizations has already tried to send disaster relief, like maybe food and medicine for them. But here was the problem, judges. In many places, the aid could not reach the people because the rounds were dangerous and the workers there were attacked by maybe like the people there. And that is why military support was needed, judges. It is important because only when there was a security, then there would be a food, medicine, and education programs could actually reach the people there. And let me respond to what the proposition has claimed before, that they said that it is not fair for society, right? But the proposition said prioritizing military aid is not fair for society. So let's ask ourselves, what is truly unfair, judges? Is it more fair to give people food for 1 week, but then let them suffer again because the war continues? Or is it more fair to give them security so they can live safely or maybe go to school and build their own future? And we do strongly think that fairness is not only about giving quick help, judges. Fairness also means giving society a chance to live without any fear. And military aid creates safety so that the disaster relief can actually work. Without security, aid is wasted, judges, and people would just suffer again and again. Well, let me give a global example. Like in Syria, international groups sends them a lot of food and medicine, but because the war never stopped, then the families kept running away even after receiving aid. So was that fair? Let's just ask ourselves, judges. No, judges. Real fairness is stopping the conflict so people can live more peacefully in the future. And the second one, for the rebuttal, they said that military support also gives food based in the status quo, right? But what the proposition said today is that military support already includes food and humanitarian help, like, but this actually supports our side, not them. Why? Because it shows that military aid is not only about weapons that they talk about, judges, but it also brings like logistics, transport, and protection. So the food can be delivered safely, right? I mean, if there are no security and if it's not safe enough, then how will the food or the medicine came for the people? How can it reach those people? Let's take Somalia as an example. In the past, food aid ships were attacked, judges, by the pirates. So when military forces came to protect the ships, then the food finally reached hungry families. So without the military protection, the food would never arrive, judges. And the third one, they talk about it is not natural. They argued that military aid is not natural, that it takes side. But this is not always true, judges. I mean, military aid can also mean peacekeeping missions that are natural and only protect civilians. Like maybe, for example, in South Sudan, as far as I know, the UN peacekeepers guard refuge camps, so families can safely get like food, water, and medicine. So this is military aid, judges, but it is neutral and focused only on protection. But it doesn't mean that they won't give them like safe food or maybe like medicines. So the idea of the proposition that said military aid cannot be neutral is totally wrong, judges. In many cases, it is the only way to make disaster relief safe and effective. And the next rebuttal, they said that their side is more effective. Well, they might claim like that, but now let me ask you, effective for how long, judges? Disaster relief is effective only for a short time. It gives food, water, and shelter for people, but it only stays for maybe like a days or a week, or even for the long one is like a month maybe. And after that, the same problems return, can pause again, and the problems will still be there, and it can comes back again and again. Well, while military aid is more effective in the long term, judges, because it prevents new disasters and makes sure that relief can reach people safely, judges. For example, let's talk in Afghanistan. International groups send food and medicine, but in many areas, judges, aid workers were attacked and supplies were stolen. It was only when military forces gave protection that the relief could finally reach the people, judges. So this actually shows that without military aid, disaster relief becomes weak and blocked. So let's ask ourselves, which one is more and truly effective, while their side only reacts for a short time, judges, or the side that prevents, protects, and supports in the long term, like in our sides? So clearly, the opposition solution is more effective. And in conclusion, at the end of this debate, um, we must compare the both sides, judges. And we do think that we are the one that stands strong against them. So that is why we are proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Okay. So, Opposition whips has spent 8 minutes and 40 seconds. Okay. Okay, now let's invite the reply speaker. Reza.
I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, judges and adjudicators and my esteemed opponents. It is very clear from the arguments given both by the proposition and the opposition side that the proposition side has obviously lost this debate. There's few things that we need to clarify and few things that we need to summarize of what has happened in this debate. So first, the big picture of the big arguments of by the proposition team is that it helps the poor, it helps the famine, it helps the poverty that is happening in those wars. That is happening in those conflicts. But as we have stated in our second speaker that is giving them a constructive rebuttals, and our third speaker that is clearly summarize and do a comparative analysis in this motion, that it only serves as a temporary solution. It's not a big it's not the root of how of what of the solutions. It's only it's only a temporary benefit as to help these poor people lift off by these wars. As our third speaker already said, it's only give them a week, a month, maybe 2 months, and then what is going to happen? It's on the cycle again. They're going to get international help, and it's not going to productively solve the solutions. And they said that it's going to be needed a lot of budgets for military support, but it's actually not, because more budget, it's going to need more budgets for disaster relief, because it's continuously we're giving them disaster relief like foods, clothes, and waters continuously for over these past of how long the wars are going to escalate, of how long the war is going to going on. So the budget is actually going for the disaster relief because of how uncertain how long the war is going to be. Instead, the budget if we do the budgets for military support as we have supported, they're going to be, for example, maybe 1 or 2 months military operations, and the solution is going to solve, and then the budget needed is not going to be that much if compared to the budget for disaster relief. And the proposition side have given us no solutions as to what the problem is. What is the purpose that this motion has given us? What is the purpose? So the purpose is we want the conflicts, we want the wars that is happening in Israel, the wars that is happening in Ukraine, South Sudan, Syria to end. And they've only given us temporary solutions. So their big arguments are going to just help the people that are suffering from wars, from poverty, from famine. It's only going to give them the temporary solutions. And on to the next, that they said that it's not fair that the military support is going to take a side, even though the UN is obviously very neutral as to solve the situations. They're not going to pick a side as to which country is going to get military support, even though they said that the international aid is also going to pick a side. It's not we're not saying that, for example, that the United States giving international aid to Israel. No, they're not giving them to Palestinians because they're exclusively support Israel, but they've given them to Israel only. Now, it's different from the United Nations. The United Nations is strictly neutral. And for all the reasons above, it is clear as day that the proposition team has lost this debate, and we highly encourage the judges and adjudicators to vote for team opposition. We proudly oppose. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's discuss about the motions. Okay, aku tiba-tiba pikiran ya, kalau after watching you guys yesterday and today. Again, aku tuh end up with this conclusion bahwa emang you deserve to represent NTB ya. Jadi you win the apa? Saya nggak ragu, no doubt. Kenapa tiba-tiba kalian bisa menang over any other regions? Ternyata your collaboration, Reza, Ersa, Alma, I aku nggak ngelihat the vibes ketika kabupaten tuh jauh lebih progressive, and I think you deserve to represent our province. Itu ya, itu yang pertama yang aku pengen. I appreciate that. Good luck for the competition. Again and again, harus itu dijaga terus semangat ini, konsistensinya, your chemistry antara speakers itu jaga terus ya sampai kompetisi besok berlangsung. Dan after watching your performance itu aku ngerasa bahwa uh, national circuit juga kalian juga kayaknya sangat positif ya. I think juga akan bisa kompetisi lebih baik. Mudah-mudahan kita bantu dengan doa. Nah, dan musim ini juga cukup sulit sebenarnya musim ini untuk kalian, apalagi diposisikan sebagai opposition. And I'm happy ketika kamu bisa melihat celah yang posisi itu dapat. Nah, mungkin perlu diperkuat adalah terkait dengan gitu loh. Kalian ketika membuat sanggahan ini, sebutin dulu headings apa argumen dari tim lawan. Nah, misalnya aku tadi kan bilang tentang principles of international aid, itu apa sih prinsipalnya? Nah, meskipun sebenarnya dalam tadi baik si Ersa, si Reza sama si Alma ketika ngebuat elaborasi atau apa namanya sanggahan ke aku tuh udah kena sebenarnya. Tapi alangkah lebih rapinya lagi, misalnya kamu langsung nembak mau nyanggah argumen yang mana. Karena aku hal lain dua hal itu pun lemah terkait dengan prinsip international AIDS-nya itu yang mungkin pada akhirnya nggak boleh kalau yang kita masih international aid itu maka goalnya adalah pertama nggak boleh menyulut konflik yang lebih gede lagi pertama. Yang kedua harus netral itu kan juga yang perlu dilakukan. Nah, menurut aku itu ada sih di Alma tadi. Nah, kalau bisa di Reza udah nyetuh itu pertama kali gitu loh terkait dengan humanitarian principles. Tadi juga dibahas sama si Ersa, which is good. Nah, tapi menurut aku akan lebih bagus kalau kamu ngejelasin on how pada akhirnya karena principle H itu masih bisa ke-achieve meskipun kita tetap prioritizing military support. Nah, jadi jangan cuma fokus ke effectivity. Itu bagus, itu udah bagus kamu asking about the effectivity of my proposal is the big core of my ideas, which is also the failure of proposition itu gagal untuk jelasin itu. Nah, itu bagus banget. Tapi ingat my core ideas itu kan principal debate kan. Saya kan nggak mau ngebahas tentang bagaimana caranya apa kita prioritizing ini, kemudian kenapa ini lebih efektif. Tapi kalaupun itu ditanya, apa itu juga perlu untuk ditanyakan juga. Tapi yang pertama kamu harus juga komentar terkait dengan prinsipal dari AIDS itu sendiri. Nah, kamu bisa datang dengan divining the principle. Nah, kalau international aid itu kan bukan kayak giving bantuan yang yang minor misalnya di sebuah daerah apa kita kirim ada apa bencana alam kita bagi mie instan medicine tapi itu lebih dari pada itu ada agenda besar di balik itu tentang apa. Nah, argumen yang kedua tentang global stability, paham nggak? Nah, itu yang kamu tadi belum begitu bahas tentang global stability. Apa maksudnya? Saya kan khawatir nih kalau kita eh, apa namanya putting military support over disaster relief itu akan create instability secara global. Nah, justru kalian datang bahwa oh enggak, justru malah akan lebih stabil dong. Kalau kamu ya ada sih, ada kalian jelasin itu. Justru kalau kita kayak ngebayin cuma kayak fokus ke hal-hal kecil seperti food, kan itu kan ada kan food itu tak ada kan medicine itu seperti tadi yang ya, yang kalian sampaikan itu bagus. Tapi masalahnya kalau memang kekhawatiran dari tim proposisi tentang stabilitas global, kami rasa justru nggak akan mudah stabil kalau kita tuh nggak ada military support gitu loh. Nah, itu yang pertama. Tadi itu ada, tapi stop di situ. You can continue by saying, kalaupun misalnya ada negara tertentu yang cuman allies with Misalnya Israel doang yang didukung. Kemudian misalnya Ukraine doang yang didukung gitu loh. Nah, justru itu create stability. Anggaplah kita lihat konteksnya Ukraine versus Russia. Loh, akan lebih harm gitu loh kalau kamu biarkan Ukraine itu perang sama Rusia, which is imbalance, nggak imbang gitu loh. Makanya negara aliansinya itu datang seperti US. Maksudnya apa? Itu kan sebenarnya bukan murni untuk mendeklar war, tapi untuk mengontrol gerakan-gerakan dari serangan-serangannya apa Rusia ke Ukraine, yang dimana sekarang kan kondisinya adalah di Ukraine itu lebih severe, lebih banyak apa namanya suffering victims tuh banyak sana yang meninggal segala macam karena kan the power of Rusia versus Ukraine itu kan lebih apa nggak balance gitu loh. Makanya dengan adanya military support seperti yang diberikan oleh si US itu malah akan jadi lebih membantu stabilitas supaya perang ini berjalan terus gitu loh. Supaya tidak ada satu sisi yang merasa superpower untuk menghancurkan satu negara lain gitu sehingga ini nggak akan aman untuk mereka. Kenapa? Nah, jadi itu kan yang kalian bisa ini bisa create stability gitu ya. Jadi jangan stop tentang efektivitas aja, tapi kamu continue. Karena itu yang apa yang saya goalkan supaya kita apa tetap stabil, nggak usah ada apa sending troops, sending weapons yang berdampak pada orang berperang terus segala macam. Nah, padahal kamu bilang, oh, yang tadi si R sama Reza bilang, oh enggak kok justru kalau kita datang di sana untuk mengamankan, untuk memudahkan distribusi bantuan-bantuan, menekan misalnya ada apa tekanan-tekanan militer dari apa lawannya misalnya itu yang kita kepinginkan supaya bisa stabil dalam perang temporary itu bagus banget tapi itu dielaborasi lagi gitu loh tadi cuma jadi tadi itu si Reza kurang kurang elaborasi aku apa tentang temporary itu lebih clear di Alma gitu lah. Mungkin elaborasimu adalah bisa nambahin. Misalnya kalau kamu ngejelasin tentang temporary, oh iya, kan kalau kita bandingkan meskipun military support itu lebih distraktif, itu emang distraktif untuk menuju perdamaian. Misalnya kasus di Afghanistan ataupun di Irak pada akhirnya kan perang selesai, kemudian penjajah bisa dilawan akhirnya sekarang mereka udah bisa apa nggak ada war lagi nah itu bisa contohnya ataupun misalnya dibandingkan sama kamu hanya fokus apa cuman nontonin orang perang kemudian uh, bantu yang apa makanan medicine ataupun tenaga medis ya nggak selesai masalahnya terus apa berperang sampai nggak ada habisnya nah kita buat military support itu untuk menekan apa perang agar lebih stabil lagi. Nah, karena itu lebih long term efeknya. Meskipun di awal itu dia distraktif, tapi long term dampaknya lebih untuk stabilitas. Tapi kalau yang tadi itu kamu nggak mau memfokuskan military support itu long term short term aja. Itu lama, lama prosesnya, lebih slower compare to yang military support. Nah, ini yang kita nggak mau. Nah, kalau slower, itu malah akan lebih buruk keadaan stabilitas global, ekonomi global, politik global, keamanan global, security, dan seterusnya. Itu kan lebih berdampak kepada apa society. Nah, itu kamu bisa continue ke situ supaya bisa habis aku punya kasus gitu, Za. Jadi itu yang mungkin kamu bisa. Nah, tapi tadi debatnya jadi bagus. Aku suka kalian punya chance untuk karena backupnya si Ersa sama backupnya si Alma tuh bagus. Jadi strong juga backupnya gitu. Nah itu mungkin supaya backupnya lebih stronger lagi, kan si Reza lebih elaboratif lagi di awal sebagai apa namanya pilar kamu sebagai leader of opposition itu penting banget ya. Nah, aku ngerti mungkin tadi kamu fokus di effectivity karena emang itu kan bolong di timku, which is make sense gitu. Tapi ingat ada agenda lain yang kami terkait dengan global stability sama principle of giving aid. Nah, itu harus diingat sebagai argumen udah muncul di awal sebagai tim proposisi. Nah, itu jangan sampai lewat. Tapi memang strategi kayak tadi, kalaupun ada yang lewat Ersa, nah tugas Ersa untuk menuntaskan yang belum tuntas di Reza. Nah, itu tugasmu. Nah, misalnya kayak tadi aku nanyain tentang aku balas lagi ke Reza mengenai tentang efektivitas. Aku bilang itu bagus tadi jawaban si Ersawi. Kalau kamu bahas tentang efektivitas, nah kalau si Reza kan ngebahas efektivitas menyelesaikan masalah kan itu kan sebenarnya bukan efektivitas hanya fokus ke tentang bagaimana distribusi disaster relief. Yang itu udah bagus Esa bahas. Nah mungkin tambahin lagi, kalaupun efektivitas terkait dengan solving the problem, kamu bisa highlight lagi bahwa aku gagal di tim proposisi. Kamu bisa hancurin lagi dengan mengatakan bahwa kalaupun pada akhirnya kamu mau fokus ke disaster relief tapi ada sedikit military support itu malah nggak efektif untuk end up apa uh, solving the problems yang root problemnya which is tentang perangan itu tadi. Nah, kalaupun kamu khawatir tentang distraktif, ya distraktif itu nggak apa-apa di awal emang seperti itu risikonya karena udah berperang ya mau lagi. Kalau berperang ya itu adalah menekan dengan power juga. Nah, power yang bisa sangat mungkin adalah military support, bukan seperti giving food atau medicine ataupun yang disaster yang which is not begitu relevan dengan situasi sekarang di mana konflik yang begitu uh, apa uh, panas gitu. Nah, itu mungkin kalau bisa continue on that side gitu akan lebih bagus. Tapi our team itu kuat untuk membahas tentang activity. Ini supaya tim kamu lebih kuat aja gitu kan sebagai tim oposisi. Nah, yang lanjut mungkin I think yang menurut aku juga bagus juga tadi mengenai iya I think juga perlu comparing gitu loh. Misalnya terkait dengan oh ya, aku suka banget cara kalian untuk membawa contoh atau evidence atau examples. Nah, ini strategi juga ya. Kadang-kadang kan kita itu kan nggak bisa nemuin example segitu cepat atau dan relevan dengan mosi. Nah, kamu tadi bagus banget cara lainnya. Nah, itu bagus dan cara mengambil examples dari yang apa yang lawan itu sampaikan, nama negara yang dia bahas, kemudian isu yang contoh yang dia bahas, itu kamu juga bahas. Nah, itu akan menjadi poin penting buat tim kalian juga. Itu bagus menurut aku cara seperti itu, tetap dipertahankan, jangan sampai kamu missing nggak bahas sama sekali tentang contoh-contoh yang saya bahas sebagai tim proposisi. Itu next harus tetap itu dipertahankan dan bisa ditambah dengan contoh-contoh lain gitu ya akan jauh lebih bagus. Dan kalian membawa contoh yang tadi kamu point out dengan oh ya Afgan tuh begini loh, dia justru begini loh. Jadi kamu bisa balik situasinya. Misalnya saya dan tadi Afghanistan itu sekarang nggak lebih baik kan kondisinya. Nah kamu bisa balik, oh justru malah sekarang malah udah nggak ada perang dong. Itu udah jauh lebih baik untuk menstabilize di ekonomi itu memang butuh proses, butuh waktu. Itu akan jauh lebih bagus ketimbang world itu nggak berhenti berhenti. Ya sekarang kita udah better, udah nggak ada war. Kalaupun si US udah pulang ke rumahnya, tapi paling nggak US itu udah giving kontribusi untuk menciptakan peace di sana dan nggak ada lagi war di sana. Nah itu mungkin bisa bisa baik seperti itu sebenarnya. Nah itu terus tadi ada tinggal dipertajam lagi. Susah adalah this is strategi intim untuk kamu bisa um, elaborating your ideas dengan ngambil contoh dari apa yang sedang dibawa oleh lawan kamu, kemudian kamu balik situasinya, balikan narasinya gitu ya. Itu kamu bisa tadi bagus, I think it's a very good strategy. Ini udah mau habis kayaknya waktunya. Kita lanjut ke sedikit lagi.